world is different today. The world is so different because I think I would be more afraid of her growing up in the world today as it is now, how I feel cold growing up in it, than I did when she was growing up in the world back then. I think it wasn't as scary, I don't think I'd have children.
Hello, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Crystal. Welcome to the Team Crew podcast, where you will find validation, inspiration, and humor about this messy journey of life.
We welcome you to these candid conversations as we try to figure out how to bring the best of ourselves to everything we do.
Perfect.
Exactly. Well, do you want to lead us into this conversation today?
Do I? This is the moment we've all been waiting for. This is the one, the only, is infamous mean?
Infamous is mean, yes.
Okay, so
because it means famous for bad reasons.
The infamous Donna Shadwell. We're so excited to have my mother on the podcast today. What a way to start off season 2. So yes, we've been having this conversation for a while that we thought it would be super fun to explore motherhood almost 40 years ago. I said 30, but that's not right. I'm almost 40.
More like 40.
Exactly.
It's very easy math for you.
I know it is.
Yep.
We're on the horizon of the big 40. So we thought, what better way to do that? I think that a lot of people know my mom and I have a lovely relationship, but also one of a lot of humor and a lot of fun together. Yeah. So we figured who better to bring on the podcast to kick off season 2 than my mom and talk about, her motherhood journey, how it compares to what motherhood looks like now, what you think is maybe ridiculous that I do as a mother that you would never do.
Or other mothers that you've seen in recent times.
Exactly. So if I refer to ratty, rat maiden, wolfie, we're acknowledging this wonderful.
Those are all, AKAs for Donna.
That's
all
right.
Terms of endearment.
They are terms of endearment. A lot of people don't understand that, but they are terms of endearment.
Exactly. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Are you
Glad
excited?
to be here.
Yeah?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes. Are you nervous to be here?
Nerves, no.
I mean, she should be nervous given that we gave her a false set of questions. And we just prepared the real set of questions after the fact just to throw her totally off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
No.
make her really nervous.
Exactly.
Tell us about 16-year-old Crystal.
That's where we should start.
Oh, no, don't start there.
Start with the best. Go with the...
Obviously, I look up to my mom a lot, and I don't think I appreciated a lot of things that would have happened in my life. We joke about 16-year-old Crystal and all these different things that happened throughout the years, but I don't think I will ever have a true appreciation for all those things until I enter those phases myself. So hence why this conversation. There you go. So, I don't know. Should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, we want to set the scene.
Yes.
I think that's what we want to do. Really, a lot of what we're going to do with this, I think, episode is try to do a little bit of a contrast between then and now.
Okay.
And so I think to start that off, I think it would be interesting to know, what was your life before becoming a mother? What did you, I know that just because we've talked about it before, that you actually at one point didn't plan to become a mother.
Yeah, you didn't want to.
You didn't want to.
That's true.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that and then about the journey into deciding to become a mother.
Okay, well, I had no intentions of having children of my own. I think it was mainly because my brothers were all fathers really young, and I shared with them the responsibility of bringing up their children.
And still do.
And still do to this day. And I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to be on the sidelines. I didn't want to do that myself. So, and I mean, the same thing really happened marrying your dad. I had no intention of marrying him at all.
Somehow Mike and I are here.
We're both here. It was my mother, pounding me about I don't understand why you just can't get married. Why can't you just get married? It just got to a point where it was like, okay, I'll just get married. Okay. But that wasn't with children. The decision to become a mom was mine. I just all of a sudden turned 29 and went,
life is over.
I think I need to have a child. And I don't know why. All of a sudden I turned 29. Maybe it was an internal clock. I have no idea.
And you turned 29 in July.
Yep.
And then 13 months later, in the following August, I was born.
That's true. It didn't take any time at all, amazingly.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
You
not
jumped right
difficult.
into it when you decided to do it.
So yeah, I didn't really have any of the issues that other girls, women have even back then and today of not being able to conceive. Like there was no problem.
I was going to say, you had a
I
miscarriage.
had
You
a
can be honest about
miscarriage,
that.
and it was everything was very fast from the decision. I want to have a child. I don't know whether it was just as I was turning 29 or I had turned 29. I made that decision
It's around that time.
around that time. And then I got pregnant right away. It was very
Also very
fast.
fast,
Everything was very, very fast. So I never really had time to adjust to anything.
How
Like,
long after you had the miscarriage then did you get pregnant with me?
6 weeks later.
Holy moly, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was,
I can't even imagine trying again. Like we
Wow.
were lucky that we never had a miscarriage that we know about, but like I still can't even imagine
It was
just jumping
just-
right back
Yeah,
into it.
super fast.
well, that was because the doctor I was dealing with at the time was kind of like, obviously you have no problem getting pregnant. So just wait 6 weeks and try again and right away.
That's what you did. And
that's what
right
I
away
did.
you did.
And that's what I did.
You could have been a mother of 12 people if you
12
had, if
people.
you had really
If
tried.
I had really tried, can you imagine if I would have started when I was like 20?
No
kidding.
goodness.
Wow.
I alluded to my cousins already, but my mom is, in essence, Aunt Donna is the mother to all my cousins. So she does have 12
She
children.
does have 12 children.
I have always felt like I've had more than one child.
Yes.
I have to say that. I've
Yeah.
always felt
Not that I was not more than enough.
No, you were more than enough. You were enough, all right.
Yeah, thank you.
So 29 comes around.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's, for whatever reason, there's
Yep.
a biological clock maybe
Yep.
that's ticking. Something happens. You're like, I have all of this kind of like sense that I need to become a mother.
Yeah.
Don't know why, but
Don't
there
know
it
why.
is.
There it is.
Mike is reasonably supportive.
Yes.
Or, yeah.
He was kind of like, hey, his one request was, do you realize that if you decide to have a child, that I want you to stay home. You are not going back to work. So that was another decision that I had to think about. And at the time, I just figured, that's nothing. So it was like I agreed to it.
So was he kind of saying that in effect that you weren't going to have a career going forward on that level for at least a period of time?
That's right. That was his only request. I mean, he does not demand very much. He never has. And his only request was that I would like you to stay home and take care of that child until she goes to school.
Why
Was
do you
that
think?
because Nanny,
why did-
was
why did-
Nanny
why
Bird
did-
home with them? Like, why do you think, or was it because Nanny Bird wasn't home with them? Nanny Bird is also another term of endearment. That's my paternal grandmother.
Yeah.
So yeah, was Nanny home with them? Like, I wonder what made him think that way.
I think Nanny was sick a lot when they were young, when your dad was younger. And I think Dad just wanted our child to have that experience of he didn't want daycare and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. I don't know whether it was because of his life when he was, you'd have to ask.
I was going to say, we'll have Mike on the
You
podcast
have to have Mike on the podcast.
Yeah.
I have no idea why that was his request, but
But he wanted the mother to be in the child's
primary,
life for
yeah.
a good period of time
Till
after they were born.
until that, I don't know whether it was until that child could communicate with us and then he felt better about her going out into the world. I don't know. You'd have to ask him that.
Yeah.
That was the only request he ever had.
And then everyone was with me, if you think about it. Like, you stayed home with me till I went to school till I was 5. We're still attached to the hip 35 years later.
That's right.
My nanny Bird, who we just talked about, and my granddad lived across the street.
Yep.
My great aunt lived in the basement. Like,
Yep.
I was surrounded by every single possible person. The
Yeah.
fact that I crave attention is shocking to no one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you were surrounded by adults
Yeah.
the first 5 years of your life. You never had to do anything for yourself.
Yeah.
And everybody was always around. There was always someone there to help you or do something or play with you or take you somewhere or, and that's what your father wanted.
So then what did that look like for you? Like, what pressures, if we think about life as a young mom, like
Yeah.
what pressures were on you being home with me?
Yeah.
Maybe is there societal pressures, other pressures from dad? Like, what were some of those greatest pressures on you?
Looking back on it now, and even at the time, it was hard. It was really, really hard. It was a big adjustment after you were born, trying to make sense of what life was going to be like, because all of a sudden now I'm not going back to my job, and I loved working. Like, it's not like I hated working.
Were you still working at the police station? At the
No,
time?
I wasn't.
You
I was
You're at the
working.
bank.
You were at the.
No, I was actually at Waxman's. I was
right.
working in an office where I went to work after the police department, and it was with Linda.
That's right.
It was with Crystal's godmother.
Yeah.
And that's where we became really close friends. And I loved that job. I was trained to be an accountant and I loved it. I loved that. I just loved it. I had a social life. I had, so it was very hard to all of a sudden I'm home with a baby.
So just step back maybe just for 1 second before we get into the motherhood part. What was because you said you had to make a decision because Mike was basically putting you in a position where he was saying, look, it's either this path or this path, at least for the immediate future.
Yeah.
How do you make that decision?
Well, I figured like at the time, I really didn't know what that would entail. I'm sure I didn't put a lot of thought into it. He was never demanding of a lot of stuff and he had a lot of his own stuff he was going through. So to me, it was like, okay, that's the only thing you're asking. Like, that's not bad. I can adjust.
Yeah, because you didn't know half of what it was going to be like.
Exactly. I was just like, I can adjust.
And would you find, like, your social circle at the time, would they have been sort of supportive of that anyway? Like, would you have found support with people being like, either saying, because I think some people
like Linda
today,
was already a mom and
Linda
stuff like that.
But I guess here, what I'm imagining is that in sort of present time, if you were to say, and as a to-be mother and decide, okay, I'm going to have a child, but then I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom for, I don't know, for years, right? Yeah. If you say that today, I think there's a great deal of people that look at you with sort of a, really? Really?
Yeah.
That's what you're going to do?
Especially if you said it was because your husband demanded it. I think that's what's even more so. I think there's moms who choose, who know that's the life they want. They want to be a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
They're excited about the the prospect of being a stay-at-home mom. That's very important to them. But I think if you brought in the equation now, like my husband is saying I have to do this, that would be even more outlandish.
I think it was more, but it wasn't even like him saying, it was just something he requested and he was willing to do what it took for that to happen.
Yeah, because he worked extra jobs.
Yeah, he would work more so that you could do that.
Yeah.
He was not as home as much. That's the after effect that all of a sudden we were faced with once it was happening.
Yes.
Which I didn't anticipate.
Okay.
At all.
Yeah. But like your social group at the time wouldn't have thought it was, in the case of Mike, an unreasonable request.
No.
Nor would they have thought that giving up your sort of career and what you were doing on the accounting side as crazy either for a period of time as well. Yeah. I think that's just interesting because I think contrasting that to today, I think there's on both sides, I think you'd get
it's a
big gap in terms of what people might expect, the expectations.
Exactly.
Society too, I think we always talk about this. Like, I don't think society's built in a way for current moms to be able to, like, there's an expectation that we do it all.
Yes.
Like we have a full-time job and we're a full-time mom and we have a social life and we somehow take care of ourselves and our relationships. Like I think society has been like, we're going to give you the same number of hours, but we're going to ask you to do everything full.
And back then you were able to kind of make that decision and figure, I'll make this work. Like it's not a big issue.
Yeah.
It's not a big issue.
It's interesting because I think that there's something to say that you might have had more options at that time to some degree because at least that were socially acceptable.
Yep.
Right? Because on some level, what was socially acceptable at the time was one, choosing to be a mother.
Yep.
And potentially a stay-at-home mother.
Yep.
That was okay.
Yep.
It was also okay if you chose not to be a mother.
Yeah.
Would you have been supported then as well if you had just decided, hey, I've decided not to be a mother at all?
Well,
because that was a path that you were originally on.
Right. I was getting to 29 years of age and deciding not to have children gave me a lot of grief with my mother, not so much with my friends, not so much with my siblings, not so much with really, basically it was more my mother. My friends did not question that.
It's the previous generation that had more of that.
Yep.
And so some things don't change.
a lot of our friends had already had children.
Yeah, you were later, just like Matthew and I.
Exactly. Like our friends had already had children. So to them, it was like, they'd already been through it. It was kind of like, hey, listen, if that's your choice.
I wonder then, like, and I think we say this, like, friends can't ever fully tell you what it's like. They can try to be like, it's going to radically change things, but they can't ever give you the full scope.
No.
So when you, like, if your sense of what it was going to be was a little unrealistic, there wasn't anyone who was like, like, Mike's going to have to work more, or like, you know what I mean?
No,
like,
we had to find that out for ourselves. We had to find it out for ourselves. Yeah. Definitely. It was kind of like trial and error as you're going along.
Which is like everything with parenting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was no book. That's, I think, what I found the strangest thing is like, I went to prenatal classes. I talked to people. I did this, I did that to prepare what I thought I could prepare myself for for this big change that was going to come up in my life. And I'm like, I can do all this. It's like not a problem. And then all of a sudden I was home and it was like, oh my God, you know, I was struggling. I struggled like, oh my God, because I wasn't prepared.
Yeah. What would have been sort of the biggest struggle that in that
struggles,
transition?
yeah.
Struggles.
Well,
Yeah, probably struggles.
Well, I mean, first of all,
other than it being Crystal and like
yeah, exactly.
That would just be the root.
Actually, she was a very easy baby.
Yeah.
She was a very, very easy baby.
Get
No
my
problem
mom in
there.
here to see how easy
Yeah.
I was. Just have a little competition going.
Yeah. So that was no problem. It was really more me and I think my relationship with Mike, because like all of a sudden he's not home as much anymore.
Of course. Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm not out in the world with the people I was used to being with every day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I'm with my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and aunt.
Yep.
No, and Aunt Sue did not live with us when you were born.
Oh, she moved in. That's right.
She
When I was
moved
little.
in later on.
Yeah.
We had I think it was actually Joanne and Brian who were living with us when you were born.
Yeah, that's my aunt and uncle.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it was different. Like there could be days where I wouldn't see
Anybody.
because I was working.
Yeah.
I was doing my social life. I was doing this. Mike and I were, so all of a sudden it was this huge change, and you have your
To your
own
identity. Like your identity changes,
identity
right?
and your physical stuff. I had horrible problems breastfeeding you
Yep.
that I had to adjust to, and my own thing. Like, I couldn't breastfeed. Things were going. Your dad wasn't around. I was doing nothing but like eating. And so I put on like a lot of weight. Like it was just, everything was so different. Like it was so different. And I wasn't in a group like today. Like you talk to moms and you guys interact. Everybody was at work. There was nobody who stayed at home. I was 29 years, 30 years old, and I'm staying home with a baby. My friends were all working.
Is that because they had already had children?
They'd
or
had their
back to
children.
work?
They'd had their children.
And then you just there weren't other mom groups that you connected with?
There were groups
Like
that
Play and Learn wasn't until I was later.
I did at 6 months. I started to leave the house and take you, and we found stuff to do because it was like, I'm sorry, I'm not staying here in this house every day. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to her.
Yep.
And because then when Mike comes home, I'm miserable because whatever. So it's like,
Well, you're probably losing your mind a little bit at that point.
Yeah, the
If
four
you go
walls feel
from
very closing in when
very,
you're
very small.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so we went out into the world and we found play groups and mothers groups. And eventually when you were able to, I would leave you at a group so that I could have a few hours to myself.
When does that happen? I haven't got there yet. How old do you think I was when that happened? Because I'm looking so forward to the day when I can just drop Cole off.
Well, you do today because it's daycare. You
Yeah,
didn't go
that's
to
true.
daycare.
Yeah, so
there was no daycare. Like not for me. There was daycare.
But I wasn't signed up
chose
for it.
not
Yes.
to do it. There was daycare.
That's
But there were groups where you must have been maybe while you were walking, and you would have had to have been toilet trained.
Okay.
So, I mean, I could leave
2-3
you.
years old.
Right. And I could leave you and go and do the grocery shopping by myself.
Yeah.
Right. So,
It's interesting that like really, I remember my biggest goal on maternity leave was like, I have to leave the house once a day. Right? Like that was always my thing. And it really, I think it makes that difference. If you're just staying within the four walls, it feels very isolating and very alone.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, like technology helps us feel somewhat connected to other moms. Like we're all like on Instagram
I
together.
didn't
Well, at least you
We had
can
none of that.
find groups way
Yeah.
easier,
yeah,
right?
I had to go out and look for it.
Yeah.
I had to go and, go to the town, and we were in Richmond Hill at the time. Town of Richmond Hill. Are there programs? Is there this? Ask other people. Like
Go to a community center and just ask.
Exactly. Take her swimming.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 6 months. We went to a swimming class, you and me.
Yep.
Like I had to go and find stuff.
Because then maybe you meet other mothers there and then you can figure
Exactly.
out.
And I did. I met the one mom that I found right away was Darlene. I don't know if you remember.
remember Dar- yeah, no,
Darlene lived on our street, and she had a little boy the same time as Crystal. And actually, I met her. I didn't realize she lived on our street, but she was the sister of a friend of ours. So, and I didn't realize. And all of a sudden, so it was like, oh my God, there is someone on the street.
And you already had a sort of commonality between you, not only with your children, but also like you knew similar people.
Exactly. So it was great. I was actually able, oh my God, there's somebody, if I need to get out of the house for an hour, I used to call Granddad. Granddad, you want to come and sit with Crystal? I'm going to go over and have a coffee with Darlene. And then nanny bird would come up looking for me because one coffee stretched into, you take advantage of it, right? It's like, yeah.
And funny enough, Cole's with Granddad right now. So
Yeah,
there
that's
you
right.
go.
That's right.
There you
Exactly.
go.
Exactly.
Yes.
And because in Richmond Hill, that's when Mike's parents lived across the street from you.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
And was that true when Crystal was born?
They were there from the time I was born. They moved away.
She was born when we lived in the house across the street from from Nanny and Granddad. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I remember when they moved because I was in elementary school. Like they were there the whole time I was like.
Oh yeah, we were in Richmond Hill right from when Crystal was born until she went to grade 2.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
we moved to Newmarket.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I used to toddle down the street. My granddad used to walk to the end of his driveway. I used to walk to the end of my driveway. He'd like watch me run across the road so I could go to their house. It was the dream.
It sounds like the dream.
I would
how,
phone him.
And how supportive were they during that sort of initial 0 to 6 months
Oh,
or a
they
year?
were fabulous.
Yeah.
They were always, go if you want, but there was nowhere for me to go on my own.
Right.
They were very supportive. They were like, if you want to go out for a few hours, we'll sit with Crystal. They had a crib in their house, just like I have a crib at our place. Like we can look after her, and she was very easy to look after, so there was no problem. But there was nowhere for me to go. I would have had to have driven, and which I wound up doing lots of times, driving to Toronto. I went and visited with my mother and father.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Where's the baby?" It's like, no, I needed to get out for a couple of hours. Okay.
When was the last
they
time
probably
you saw
were-
me without Cole?
Yeah, I
That's
know,
such a
right?
good point.
That's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we went to a Jays game this summer together,
Yeah.
my parents and I, right? And it was a day during the day. Cole was in daycare, you were at work, and I was like, "This is the first time I've spent time with my parents without you or without Cole in 3 years." Like it is because it's true. Like they're like, they just want to see the baby.
Yeah,
Well,
your
that-
parents
yeah.
probably were like, "Where's the baby?"
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like they didn't have enough
Children already.
children
yeah.
going around or people in and out of their house. It's not like they were lonely.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, where's the baby? Sorry, come up and visit us.
It's interesting because I think some of the challenges that you've brought up, I think resonate a lot with challenges that we've heard from other current mothers, right? Like it's like, obviously anything to do with eating and weight and that kind of thing sounds really, really tough after having,
Breastfeeding,
especially after having
all
a
that
kid.
stuff.
Yeah.
The isolation
Yes.
that happens, especially in that first year.
Yep.
That seems to be pretty consistent. That
It is. Yeah.
that really makes the impact on your relationship
Oh,
is big,
it's
right?
very big.
In your case, it probably was even bigger because you guys, the way that you split sort of the responsibility was you were full-time childcare 24/7.
Yep.
And Mike was,
Full-time 24/7
full-time
work.
24/7.
was
work.
driving-
He was the
Yeah,
breadwinner.
he was
Right,
driving a
and-
truck. He was gone
You
for
guys
days.
were just like, okay,
See ya.
well,
Yeah.
see ya.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's
Yeah. And
that's
we
a
had
tough thing.
spent Mike and I had been together since I was 19 years old, 10 years. And that our social life, we had the same social life. We had everything together. And, even when I was pregnant with Crystal, when he used to go on long runs, I'd go in the truck with him.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like our lives.
But that couldn't happen
were,
after Crystal was born.
oh, God, no. It was
Right.
no.
Should have brought me in the truck.
Should have brought you in the truck. So, but yeah, I mean, so it was a really huge life change.
Yeah.
Life-changing.
What happened to your friend group that you had before? Like how did you manage to stay in contact with them? Did they
Yes.
dissipate? Yeah.
No. We were fine because
A lot of them had kids, you said too.
a lot of them already had kids. The closest we were was to Linda and Ernie.
Yep.
And they had Portia already. Michael was born after you.
A month after.
Yeah. So Linda also had Crystal's godparents, Linda and Ernie, had Michael a month after. So Linda was still going to work. Her mother did their daycare. So, I mean, Linda was still working, but we still had a social life because Mike and I and Linda and Ernie had a social life. So we just made sure we still kept that social life.
Right.
Then we had children. Portia was there. She was a little bit older. We would bring the babies. No problem. My brothers started having more children. So there was always to interact with family. Some of our friends who had children that were older, I would say maybe we didn't see them as much
Okay.
because we
Their
always
kids were either quite a bit older than
quite a bit older, and we always brought Crystal with
different
us.
phase of life almost.
Different phases of life. Like we would go and visit Anne and Larry,
Yeah, but Randy's 5 years older than me.
but we would bring you with us.
Yeah.
So if we were going there even for dinner for the night, we would bring her.
Yeah.
We didn't leave her. She came with us. So a lot of our friends who had children that were older, I don't think they understood that. So we didn't see them as much.
Because
It
they
was
wanted
just-
kid-free time.
They wanted child-free time, and we were like, well, no, we have a child. So we kind of interacted more with people who had children that were around Crystal's age.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Makes sense.
So yeah.
Looking back on it now and looking back on sort of that, especially that initial time, do you, regret's the wrong word, but do you imagine yourself, almost 40 years from then, but looking back, do you think of yourself as like making a different choice about whether or not you went back to work, or do you?
Oh, if I would do it over again, I would have gone back to work.
Yeah.
I would have gone back to work.
When?
I would have.
But like right away, so
I
12
probably,
months, 18 months, 24 months?
Depending on whether Nanny and Granddad, how early they would have taken you. I'm sure they would have been very supportive.
Yep.
But I don't know whether they could have done daycare full time. So it would have probably been, I would have gone back part-time, even just to start. Part-time, which I eventually did when she was
5?
Yeah, 5. Yeah. To integrate everybody back into me going back to work. I would have gone back at least part-time. And then if full-time would have probably been, she would have gone to daycare. Because there was lots of daycare when she was little. It wasn't what it is today.
The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And why do you think that would have made a difference? Like for you, for me, for
I think
everything?
it would have made a difference for all of us. I think
Mike would have worked less.
Mike could have been home more. I could have then, I think, been a little bit more fulfilled in life. And I think socially, you needed that. You needed to be out of the house and away from all of these adults. You needed children to play with. So I think that at the time, if I would have, if you would have had that hindsight, I mean, I would have probably gone back to work even only on a part-time basis a lot earlier.
Yeah.
It is shocking when you think about these things. Like for the fact that Dad was gone so much, and Dad and I are so close, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone says,
Yeah.
like my dad's my favorite always. Like, so it's shocking that him and I somehow made up that lost time.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm so social and I'm so extroverted now, considering when I first entered the world of school and everything, because I was only surrounded by adults, I was so shy. Like, I wonder, like, do you have any insight? Like, why do you think, what helped with that?
Well, I think that your father had to make a decision to put himself to find what he could do with you, because he was so unprepared for having a daughter.
Yeah.
He figured we would have a boy.
A little football player.
And he would be
Probably
able,
when you said, I want to get pregnant, he was like, oh, a little boy. That sounds great.
And actually, I even felt right up until before you were born that I was carrying a boy. I kept telling him, we're having a son, like it's going to be a boy. And so he was in all of a
Wow,
sudden,
you kept his hopes high.
Right until the last minute.
And then this
what is
little
this?
girl,
it's like alphabet. It's green. Like, take it away.
But I mean, he was so, I think he had to push himself, and he did.
He did.
He pushed himself because he wasn't home as much. So what your dad did was he took over kind of like when it was time for you to be off, give up the bottle. He was the one who looked at, like, you know what I mean? He made sure it was not just you and I doing these things and he was left out. He took over that kind of stuff. And then when it was time to, like, to go out in the world and play in the playground or whatever, he would take you. Time to ride a bike, he would do that.
That's true.
Like, I didn't do all of that stuff with her because Mike took that over. He pushed himself to make sure that he had a relationship with you. And also, too, it really bothered him when Crystal and I went to England for a month when Crystal was 18 months old. And when we came back, she would have nothing to do with him, which is understandable. We were away for a month.
Yeah, I was so little, it's true. He would have been like unfamiliar. And it's funny, he's the one who was born in England, but you went to England with me.
Well, because Nanny wanted to, so I went with my mother-in-law for a month and stayed with the relatives and toured all over the place and had a great time with Crystal. But like I say, she was 18 months old. And then, that really bothered him that we came back. And when we were gone, he obviously missed us a lot. And then we came back and you'd have nothing to do with him. So we had to build a relationship. He had to build that relationship with you.
Yeah.
So he made it.
And then 10 years later, he got his wish and I started playing baseball.
That's right. That's right.
And now 20 years later, we're still playing baseball together.
Exactly.
So we found our thing.
That's right.
But it's interesting to think about those little things too. Like you say, like bike riding and all that kind of stuff. And it's true in the moments when I was like, you've told so many stories about like when I had to cut the soother, when I had to stop having bottles. Like he was the one who came in strong armed and was just like, no more.
Exactly. Yeah.
What So we did talk about what would happen for Crystal had you had the opportunity to go back to work earlier. I'm curious for you personally, how do you think that would have changed you?
Sorry, we're
Or had an
interviewing
impact?
Donna, not me. My friend.
Yeah.
I thought you were interviewing my mom and I, as opposed to we're interviewing my mom.
How would that change me?
How would that have impacted you? Had you had the opportunity to have gone
Oh,
back
okay,
to
gone
work
back to work.
earlier,
Right.
Say maybe even just after 12 months, you had gone back on a part-time basis.
Yeah.
How would that have impacted you?
Well, I think I would have been a little bit more aware of what I was neglecting about myself if I had gone back to work, because I all of a sudden became this person with like sweatpants all the time. And, you know, and it really was, you just, all of those things, all of the stuff I was so familiar with and doing, all of a sudden I stopped doing them. And you don't realize it. You just stop doing them. Stop putting black eyeliner on. Stop putting my hair properly. Stop, wearing jeans, looking after my weight.
All of that was just
thrown out the window because I had other stuff I had to do.
well, and I think there's part of that is, partly because you put your kid number one.
Well, the needs of the child.
Right? And that's what's demanding of you.
Yeah. Exactly. It was because I don't know whether if I would have been younger, I would have adjusted better, or whether it was because by the time I was 30, I was very set in my own ways. And all of a sudden now I had to change all of that. I think when you're younger and you have children, you're still have a little sense of youthfulness that you're kind of like a little bit of a child yourself. But when you're, I had been working since I was 18 years old.
Right.
Actually, before that, I worked every summer. I mean, I was, and all of a sudden you're just giving up all of that, So
I said that too. And I think that's like a big reason, like, I remember like the day before going on mat leave being like, I don't want to leave work. Like I love work.
Yeah.
And like, that's a big reason why we are like a one and done family, right? Like to not like go back on mat leave again.
Yep.
Because it's true, like trying to carve out your identity then. If your identity only becomes a mom, that can be, right? Like it really can radically change like your own everything, how you feel about like, right? So.
And that was the one reason that I decided after she was born, I said to your dad, no more children. That's it. Because I'm not staying home for the rest of my life doing nothing but bringing up children. I will stay home and bring up Crystal, but I am not doing this for the rest of my life. So that was the reason, everybody has their own reasons for if you're going to have more children or whatever. And it was like, no.
Yeah.
That was it for me.
Done it. And when you have, again, a wonderfully perfect child.
When you start with perfect. I mean, I think when Crystal and I first started dating, one of our conversations was, I was like, oh, you're an only child. And your response was, yes, my parents got it perfect the first time, so they decided never to try again.
Cole will say the same thing eventually.
Exactly.
There you go, Cole. There's your line.
There's your line. I'll give you your line. I will. I always say that.
Yep.
Like you said, I was a good baby. A lot of people talk about the first baby's really easy. Then you have a second and you're so much harder. Yep. Not that things didn't get harder and not that things weren't hard. Yep. But I definitely worry about that piece, right? Like, Cole was a wonderful baby, an easy sleeper, all those things.
And my decision even more was iterated when Linda had Michael.
Oh, right.
Because like Portia was a great kid. She was kind of like our child, like, right? And then all of a sudden, Crystal came along and she was a pretty good baby. And then Michael came along and he wasn't the greatest and Linda was a mess. And, so I mean, it was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I made that decision. I'm not having any more kids,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did having Crystal, out of curiosity, how did having Crystal impact your other mothering type relationships that you had in your life?
All the cousins.
All the cousins.
A lot of the cousins came after me.
A lot of the cousins came after her.
Oh, that's fair.
Really,
Yeah,
the only two that I had really up till Crystal was Teresa and Nicole.
But you did have a very close relationship with them right from the hop.
Right from the hop. And with Linda and Portia.
Yeah.
Like, really, yeah. So, I mean...
But maybe not even just me coming along in the world. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it was like elementary school years when it was all of a sudden like me and the cousins, not just me.
Yeah. Yeah. Crystal, really, did you ever feel like you grew up as an only child?
Probably
there
not.
Were kids around all the time. My brothers were single fathers at different times. Their children would come,
just drop them off and leave them.
And they would be, so I would have them and Crystal. So she always, had playmate, not that first year, obviously.
No.
Because all the kids came along after Crystal was a year old. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I never thought I would be a bad mother. I just never wanted to be a mother. You know what I mean? It wasn't that I figured I couldn't do it, just not something I wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I felt I was quite capable of, like, you know, there was no problem with that. It's just something that I chose not to do until I decided to do it.
And it's fascinating that the decision to have children wasn't necessarily an intellectual decision. It was intuitive decision.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Would you say looking at that now and kind of looking at the intuitive decision to having children, did then having children, was there any part of you that was like, oh my God, like, what was I thinking?
No. Like, once I made that decision, and even after she was born, like, I knew this was good. Like, this was something that had to happen, that I wanted it to happen. But it changed kind of my perspective on things going forward. Yeah. Like, that's what it did. It didn't change my decision to do that. It just changed things going forward.
Yeah. It feels like it's a very much a left turn in the road, right? You can go straight and continue on the path you are on, or you can take this
whole new path that you don't know where it's going to take you.
Somewhere completely different.
Yeah. So that's all that it was. It was not anything that I regretted. It's not anything.
Not even when I was 16?
No, that was different. We're talking about when you were a baby.
Well, this podcast would be 18 hours long if we're just doing it sequentially during, baby years to whatever else.
Year 2.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about, obviously, how it impacted you, all these kind of like the pressure you felt from grandma, what you felt from dad, pressure, non-pressure, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about how a lot of that is actually quite similar to what mothers are dealing with now.
So. Yeah.
Do you think there's things that you see based on maybe my motherhood journey, my cousin's motherhood journey, the other women in this phase of life, like in this generation?
Your generation, yeah.
Are there struggles that you see us dealing with that you feel are really different, that surprise you? Like, how do you see things maybe if you were a mother today, 40 years later, do you think it would look any different?
Oh, it definitely would be different because economically, like, the world is different now. Mm-hmm. You have to have 2 incomes in order to have any facet of life. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, otherwise you only are bringing up children and doing nothing. Like, economically, yes, things are so different. So I give you guys so much credit that you're balancing it all, doing the very best you can and trying to fit everything in. Yeah. Because I didn't have to worry about that when you were young and I could stay at home.
Yeah, you didn't have the same economic concern.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
But it affected other parts of our life.
Yeah, and I come from a single income family as well. Like, my dad worked, my mom didn't. Right?
Exactly.
So that is not possible.
No, not now today.
Not if you want to provide different opportunities for your child.
If you want to have any type of then there has to be 2 incomes today. Yeah. And if you want to try and own a home, and if you want to travel, if you want to do, and there's so many things. You guys have so many more things that are available to you, but they cost money. Yeah. Programs, traveling, blah, 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 all this. It all costs more money. So, I think that's one of the things that I find is so different today, that you guys have to make different decisions because the world is different now. That's all.
Do you think there's stressors that are different? Like, is it like the stress of?
Yeah, to tell you the truth. I mean, social media and technology and all that has brought the world closer together. But with the world coming closer together and moms and everything, you get more people giving their opinions about things, bullying, this and that. And I didn't have to worry. If there was something I was doing that was wrong with you, nobody criticized me. Do you know what I mean? Because I didn't post it.
I guess, they just wouldn't know.
They wouldn't know. Yeah. Right?
Ignorance is bliss, yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't know, unless I told them. Mm-hmm. Whereas today, everybody tells everybody everything. They're posting everything. So you get critics. Well, no wonder, Yeah. So that part of it is different.
So the critic part of your life would have been like Mike's parents and your parents, probably predominantly.
Well, yeah. Of course. Like,
were they very critical anyway?
You know what? They were at times. My mother and father, not so much, because they didn't see us every day. Right. Right? Like, I mean,
Which I think is more true for most families, probably, in that era anyway, right? Like it's rare that you have your grandparents live literally across the street from you.
Yeah.
That's the reason that probably, so there was some times where I loved my mother-in-law, don't get me wrong. But I mean, I can remember one instance where I was up the street. Granddad was with you, and I was up having coffee with the girls up the street at Darlene's house because everybody happened to be there that day. And off I went. Granddad was fine. No, I'll stay with her. But obviously, while I was gone, maybe I was gone a bit too long, you needed to be fed. And I guess Nanny Bird came over and you were upset, crying, whatever, and I wasn't back yet. So she came up and got me and was mad at me. And it was like, excuse me, she's whatever. There's a bottle in the fridge if you would have really, whatever. Like, so there was that tension. But I think that was because we saw each other every day and they knew everything that was going on because Mike wasn't around. So they were helping, they were trying to help me as much as they could.
Yeah, they were invested in a different way.
Totally invested than my parents. So I would say that my mom and dad maybe didn't have the opportunity to be as critical, but that's because they weren't there every day.
Which it was probably, like I said, more of a common experience where your parents are just, What do you think how do you think that changes for parents today? Like, given that there's so much
knowing we see you every day.
Yeah, knowing we see you. No, but like
3 times a week.
How do you think for the mothers that you know in your life right now of our generation, how do you think seeing this kind of stuff online impacts them every day?
I think that I don't, I look and I see, things that girls post and mothers post and whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, do you ever have any downtime for yourself where you're not on your phone, where you're not on social media, where nobody knows what you're doing? You can just talk and do.
There's a life outside of social media.
Yeah, exactly.
If I don't post it on the phone, it didn't happen.
That's right.
So it's different. I feel that you guys are subjected to more criticism, to more like opinions from people. And I didn't have that pressure. I had other things.
And internal pressures, yeah.
Right.
Which
but
we all
not
still have.
those pressures where I think you guys have a lot more pressure from your peer groups.
There's a lot more
today.
social pressure
Oh,
to
yeah.
perform the role in a different way.
Yep, definitely.
And it's true if you see kind of everything, right? And I think there's a really big comparison game. And I'm sure that like with like milestones and things like that, you still may have felt that when you like were with me when I was little. Like Michael's walking, but Crystal's not, or whatever else. You're still maybe, but like with this, it's
that
true.
was the only competition we had.
Was walking.
Like Alicia,
Oh, yes.
Pauline's little girl, born same time as Crystal, 13 days apart. She was sitting up and she was walking before Crystal. So that was my pressure. Oh my God, my kid is not walking and not sitting up. What's wrong with her? That's the pressure I had when you were little. I never had half of the pressures you have.
Yeah, but now it's true. It's everything, right?
It's
like
everything.
you are comparing everything because like you're posting every moment that happens. So then you're like, why is that not happening, right?
Yep.
So
whereas if I felt that pressure and wanted to not deal with it, I would just, if anybody asked, "Oh, is Crystal sitting up yet?" I'd put a pillow. Yep, she's sitting up. Look at her. You know.
I guess the flip side of not social media but having access to the internet is when something was going on and you weren't sure what to do about it, especially early years.
Yep.
As kids get a little older, I think you have a little bit more sense, but early years, your knowledge base to go off and figure out what's going on.
They had books, Matthew. It's not that long ago.
Were
the doctor.
Yeah.
The doctor. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I was confused about things I should do for her, I made a doctor's appointment and I went to the doctor.
Interesting.
Oh, okay.
She's not talking. She's not doing this.
What did they say when you said I wasn't talking?
They said if you would stop talking for her, she probably would start.
And look at where we are now.
So there.
Yeah.
But that's what it was like.
Yeah.
When we couldn't figure out why, if something happened that she was having we were having a restless evening.
Yeah.
My mother would say, I'd be on the phone with my mother. She'd say, take her in the car and take her for a ride around the block. Kids always fall asleep. That's what we used to do with you. Put Crystal in the car, go around the block, scream her lungs out. She was ridiculous. She had motion sickness. I didn't know that till the doctor told me that. Start giving her Gravol, she'll be fine.
I still have motion sickness today.
Okay. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
today you guys can look that up on the internet, or you can ask a mother's group, or you can Google it.
It's true.
I had to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
which is a
Right?
bigger to do, right? Now we don't like
Yeah.
now like oh, Cole might have an ear infection. We're gonna wait how long? We're gonna self-diagnose. We're gonna
Yeah.
do all these things. We're
Yeah.
gonna look it up online, right?
And I had to go with someone who I could talk to, whether it be the doctor, Nanny Bird, my mother, Linda, right?
Which is still other
Yeah.
moms, but
other
yeah.
moms, but I mean, it was different. I couldn't sit there by myself and Google it,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's different. Very
Sense.
different.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's the added pressure of like, well, when you go on the internet, there's a whole bunch of different things
Other-
that you can
Yes.
find.
Yes.
And that makes
It's a
more
double-edged
difficult.
sword,
It's a
right?
double-edged
Yeah.
sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but like you had mentioned, like to your point about books. Yes, obviously they had books.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that my impression is you didn't have the plethora of books you have today on
Oh,
parenting.
No,
And to your point, you're like, you basically had no books that you really read before Crystal was born. It was kind of like you went to a prenatal class
I went to a
and you were
prenatal
like,
class.
okay, I guess.
yeah, and
And in fairness, people have been raising kids for
A long
very long time.
yeah,
So,
and
you know,
really they prepare you. Like that's the thing that caught me so off guard. They prepare you great
But it's
until
it's not
and
enough.
then who's
Right.
going to tell me what to do
Yeah.
with this child now that I'm home? Nobody's
And at
taught
2:00 in the morning,
Exactly.
and all these other things.
Exactly. So so it's very different. Today you have a lot more access to advice, information, and I didn't have that.
If you had, like, I don't know if it's even fair to ask this question, but like, if you had to pick, do you think you would rather do it today, or would you rather have done it when you did it?
I think I'm fine with having done it when I did it because I think, I had to fend for myself. I had to really, really trust my own instincts. So, a lot of things that I did, whether they worked out or they didn't work out, I had to figure it out for myself. So,
Yeah.
I was fine. Yeah, I don't think I would change it. I don't think I would want to have, if I was the age that I was when I had you now in this world, I don't think I'd have children. I would not have children. I wouldn't have children.
Because of all the
Everything
the
else in the world, I would not have children. Definitely not.
So had you been 29, had the impulses to have children
Right now, today?
you would have decided not
you would
to.
have ignored them.
Yep.
Why is that?
The world is different today. The world is so different because I think I would be more afraid of her growing up in the world today as it is now, how I feel Cole growing up in it, than I did when she was growing up in the world back then. I think it wasn't as scary, wasn't as, I don't think I'd have children.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I'd have children.
Do you think it's interesting though? I think like and it's kind of similar to the internet. Like we're so aware of things
Yeah.
that it does seem scarier, but then it also seems like there's more opportunity for solutions. And maybe that's because I'm part of this generation.
I think maybe that's what it is. I can't comprehend that.
And like technology, just like the way it advances and the way it progresses, maybe to us feels more manageable.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
you guys are growing. This is your generation.
Yeah.
So you guys are more open to what's going on in the world and maybe a little bit more willing to tackle it. And
Yes.
maybe, whereas the age I'm at right now, thinking about all of this, it's like, oh my God.
But then you're but if you were like, if you look back, there was lots of big things in your generation that your generation had to deal with too.
Oh, definitely.
Wars and things in different ways.
We had lots of this
Yeah.
stuff. But I don't know, at that time, that was like, okay, well, you know what? But we figured it out. We worked through it. Maybe it would be the same today if I didn't have that mindset. But if I can compare the two,
Yeah. But maybe it is just like you say about where you are in life.
Yeah.
Like now you're just ready for grandma era.
now
Yeah.
I'm just ready for
Just
grandma. Just let Cole do whatever he
easy,
wants to
exactly.
do. Have a great time, and then send him home to you.
It
There you
is.
go.
It is interesting though, because I think that on some level, at least, and I'm going to paraphrase here, and you can tell me if this feels right. But like, on some level, you feel like today's world feels overwhelming
Very overwhelming.
in a way that you wouldn't want the extra burden of having a child in it.
I was overwhelmed when she was born, and when I had my child, the world didn't seem overwhelming to me. Just my world. My world felt overwhelming,
Right.
but not the world. Today, the whole world feels overwhelming. So I just feel it's just different. But that's because I'm at the age I'm at, and I can
sure.
compare the two.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I can
that's the
compare.
point.
I can. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the point. Is doing the
Exactly.
comparison.
Yep.
Is looking at both of these
Yep.
sides.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
And I would be curious to see if there's others of your generation raising kids in the 80s where
Yeah.
they did feel like the world was, I mean, you obviously had high inflation. You had a whole bunch of things going on in the
Oh.
80s, right?
Our mortgage was 21% when we bought our first home.
Exactly, right?
There
So
you go.
there's a lot of things that were certainly had elements of overwhelm.
Yep.
But I think it would be interesting to see if a lot of people felt like there was a simpleness about the world,
Yes.
and that felt less overwhelming to your day-to-day life than your day-to-day life. Your day-to-day life might have been overwhelming in its own right, but at least the world made sense.
Like, I can remember the one thing that was so overwhelming when I was home with Crystal was I was home with her. I don't even know what year it was, so I don't even know what age, but I remember, I think I was still breastfeeding her, or it was just about near the end of that. So it was in the first year of her life. And I can remember sitting in front of the television, feeding you, and the people who went up into space, the space shuttle blew up.
Oh, yeah, Challenger.
And I was watching it, and I was like, oh my God. And it upset me so much. That was,
As it did many.
Yeah.
yes. But like, to me, I'm home. I'm like, my emotions are all over the place.
Well, your
I'm a
hormones
new mother.
are-
My
yeah.
hormones are, and I'm trying to feed this baby. And oh my God, look at what's happening to these poor people. Like, you know, and I'm watching this on television live. And it was like, that's something but that's it. Like, there was no other big things going on in the world where every day it was shoved down your throat. You know, what's going over in the Middle East, what's happening here and whatever. That was a big traumatic thing.
I wonder if the mental load of motherhood would have been a little bit different then. Because if you think about all these things we're constantly trying to contend with, again, like the different ways to feed him, food and the right choices about screens and the right choices about social exposure and all these different choices you have to make. And then there's also just the burden of the world and again, the expectations of work and all this stuff. I wonder if the mental load would have felt different, lighter.
I would be curious to know, because I think you said two things. One, the world seemed simpler. You've also said that when it came to being a mother, you were just a little bit flying by the seat of your pants sometimes, right? Because you had to. You didn't have, and you sometimes had people around you that might give you some advice.
Yep.
You didn't have a plethora of books telling you how to raise your child. Yep. You didn't have the internet to tell you how to raise your child.
Nope.
You had a doctor who you saw probably every so often. It wouldn't be all the time.
No.
And so that would be an advisor. But basically, you were kind of just relying on your own intuition to raise your child.
It was trial and error.
It was a lot of trial and error and see what happens, right? And so I think on those two levels, one, I think there is something to be said, at least with respect to the mental load potentially being easier. Because while there's obviously a stress associated with just relying on your intuition and rolling forward, and I'm sure that isn't always great because you're just like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to try this, right? Kids screaming, I'm going to try this. Kids still screaming. Okay, let's try this. Kids still screaming. Let's, right?
Yeah.
Or kids misbehaving in this way, he's 3, he acts out sometimes. And
he's in a kicking, biting, hitting, throwing phase.
Right now, right? And so it's like, we go to the internet and we're like, okay, what does the internet tell us? What do these books tell us? What do all these quote unquote parenting experts tell us?
And I didn't have
What
that.
did you do?
I just, trial and error. Okay, you were crying. Let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. You rely on your own intuitions.
Yeah. And
you have to.
In Cole bites, right now. And I know that for my mom.
Let's sum that up properly.
Cole bites you. Yes, specifically he bites you.
You never
for some
bit
reason
me,
won't
so
bite
I'm
me.
sorry. I can't comprehend
But
that.
anyway, I know that when my siblings, my older siblings, more specifically, I believe, but my mom told me when they were biting and they would bite, she got advice from one of her friends.
You bite him back.
Yeah, you bite him back.
And I'm sorry, but I had friends whose children, I think Michael bit, and Linda bit him back. Yeah, that's what you did.
Okay, everyone, I'm biting Cole tomorrow. Can you imagine what the internet would say?
Right, but that's.
Can you imagine? But that's what I'm saying.
But I think that's your point, is that you're not able to. I think today it's harder to rely on that and do that kind of.
Well, but
this works, so I'm going to do it. Right. I'm not saying this is the best approach to dealing with.
But no one would have known.
But no one would have known.
Nobody would have known.
My mom was like, "Yeah, I just bit him back, and he never bit me again."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Burn your hand on the stove once, you don't go back and touch it again.
You don't go touch it.
And that's not what we want necessarily. We don't want our kids getting hurt.
But that's how we handled it.
Yeah.
That is how we handled it.
Because intuitively, that works.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It
is just a very different time.
It's just very different time. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Would you say that of the mothers you knew then, and the mothers you know today, the mothers, how would you compare them? If you were to look at them side by side and you just to look at sort of maybe just their stress levels, how would you characterize the stress levels of either
Well,
ones?
I think the reason that possibly our stress levels when I was a young mom was to me a stress level. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
You were stressed.
I was stressed. That was my, whatever it was, whether it was because I was lonely, whether it was because I felt bad that Crystal wasn't interacting in the world. I wanted Mike to be more home, you know, all this kind of stuff. That was my stress level. Whereas today, you guys have to juggle. So I have no idea. Something to me always is getting neglected because you guys have so many stress levels these days. Whereas I never felt that I couldn't, like, I could work. Eventually it worked itself out because you just learned, either you learned to live with it or you learned to manage it. But today I feel there's so many stresses that something always goes to the wayside. You can't possibly work everything out. So there's something that's going to get neglected. That's how I feel about young mothers today.
Do you think there's a higher expectation of mothers today than there was then?
I think there's more pressure on mothers these days.
Okay.
I just think I never felt I had pressures on me, except for things that I couldn't myself tackle or handle. And I had to learn.
So the external pressures weren't there. There was still obviously the pressure of like, these are the things that I'm not liking about my life and I want to fix them.
But there were no external pressures. Whereas I feel today, we have a lot of that. A lot
of different ways.
Yeah.
So then if you were to give any advice to the current day mom, like to make things easier or anything that you would really hope that they would like take to heart, to give them hope, like what advice would you give to the moms of today?
I mean, really, I think the first thing, even though, and I don't think it's a selfish thing, I think the first thing you got to look after yourself if you can look after anybody else. How in the world are you going to be able to look after a child, have a relationship with your partner? How are you going to do any of that, be good at your job if you don't look after yourself first? So women who do not look after themselves, whether it's physically, mentally, socially, and or whatever, I feel are already behind the eight ball. I don't feel that they're going to be able to give 100% to everybody else, and whether they even need to. But you have to be selfish, if that's the word for it, and look after yourself. So, and you know.
So how do you encourage them to do that? By coming to a Something Beyond Mom event, and what else?
Well, I think today you have the opportunity to rely on other moms. So take that social aspect of it, whether it's just going out for a coffee, whether it's just chatting on the internet, whether it's just take an opportunity to interact with other, because I think that helps your mental status. Like, don't let your mental status suffer. So whatever you have to do in order to get that. And I don't feel you have to worry so much maybe about your weight and all this kind of stuff, but look after yourself so that when you look in the mirror, you can actually say, hey, I don't look too bad. Whether it's combing your hair, whether it's, I'm sorry, I always wore eyeliner. Like, throw some eyeliner. My mother was the biggest person who was always, can't you just put a little bit of lipstick on? Like, really?
We wonder why I am the way I am today.
But that's what I'm saying is like
multiple generations of lipstick and eyeliner.
It's just a minor little thing
that can pull yourself together.
Just pull yourself together a little bit. Do something small. You don't have to do something big. Do something small.
Yeah, it's like some wellness advocates advocate for just make your bed in the morning or just brush your teeth or just right. It's a little thing.
It's a little thing. You don't have to feel you have to achieve,
because it can add something to your experience.
Yeah, when everything around you is in disarray and you feel in disarray, then everything's just going to feel more.
Even today, I make my bed every morning. Your dad criticizes me every morning.
It's because you have 18 pillows. That's what he criticizes.
But no. But to me, it's like, oh my God, I walk by and it's like, I feel I've accomplished. I've made my bed.
Yeah.
Like, just do small things. You don't have to do big things, but work at them. To really try and do all those little things.
And I make my bed every day.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And
now Cole will look at this generational. Look at all these generational impacts.
That's right.
I know, right?
There you go. Make your bed.
Whereas if Mike were left on his own devices, he just wouldn't.
he tells me when I go away, he goes, the bed never gets made. He's very honest about it. I could care less.
Interesting.
Doesn't care.
No, I would say that I didn't make my bed every day until I met you.
Yeah.
And then since then, though, I do it now automatically myself.
I think there's just
90% of the time.
Yeah, there's just small
99%
things.
of the time.
95. Yeah. I think it depends on how much Cole's yelling to get out of his bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
That's fair.
Because, he can't get out of his room on his own.
But I almost always do. Like, even when you've gone away, like,
Yeah.
I still get up and make the bed.
Yeah.
It just feels nicer to get back into.
That's right.
I think it feels nicer to get out of.
Yeah, because then you're out of it.
Well, but no, I mean it more in the line of what your mom was saying. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually nice to, like, get out of a bed, having made it, and then just know that the day's kind of set in a weird way, right? You've set one thing and now you're moving on, right? It's kind of a way to, like,
Close that chapter.
yeah, close it,
Yeah.
right? It's a closing the loop of the
If my
of the
bed,
sleep,
if
right?
my bed is made, then I don't care that there's dust on my night table because my bed's made. You know what I
that's
mean?
fair.
It solves another problem.
Yeah.
It just solves something else.
Yeah, we don't like
You've
dusting.
made one increment towards something, which I think is great
Perfect.
advice. Like, I think in general, that's
That
just
can relate to
such
motherhood too.
solid advice. Like,
Yeah.
being able to take one little step, whatever that looks
Little
like,
steps, yeah.
one little step towards
Yeah.
something that makes gives you more positive experience about your life,
Like young mothers today,
and gives you a little more control. Because, like, even just throwing eyeliner on or throwing some lipstick on, that's just
It's
a
a
little bit of
small-
control. It's just a little bit of control,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
life, and it takes 2 seconds, right? You
2
can do it
seconds.
with a little baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like people who, it's like young moms today, if they're concerned about their weight that they put on afterwards, like, okay, that's a big thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what?
Don't.
Go and buy a bigger size of jeans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That
You're
you
not.
don't,
That's a big change.
it's a big, yeah,
Focus
right?
on the little
So
stuff.
just focus more on little things.
And control the things that you can be in
Yes.
control
That's right.
of. Because, losing the weight right away is not
Not-
realistic.
not
so it's much
possible.
easier
No.
just to, like you say, buy
Exactly.
a bigger pair of jeans
Yep.
that feel good, so
Just
you can feel good in your
feel
jeans.
good in your jeans.
with your lipstick on.
I think in this day and age, you have to look for more of the small things that make you feel better than trying to tackle all the big things in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
You know?
think you touch on the bounce back type culture, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think the bounce back type culture is probably highly negative on mothers' mental well-being.
Yeah.
Future episode coming, the dad bod versus the mom's bounce back. We actually are going to talk about that because there's a funniness around that, like that dads get to embrace this dad bod, but they didn't even grow the human.
Yeah,
Like, how
whereas
fair is
mums
that?
have to bounce back
And,
into
like,
their
yeah.
previous
small.
body, whereas dads get
Yeah.
to pack on weight.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just makes
Like,
no
what on
sense.
earth?
So yeah, future episode.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
We've said so much.
Yeah.
Do you have any last words, wisdom, parting messages you'd like to give to the
Or
team?
would you
crew?
actually like to talk about 16-year-old Crystal?
You know, there's always, I'm sure, you talk to any parent in my age group, and they will always have a time in that child's life that was more stressful than another time. I'm sorry, there's no child that's perfect, okay? And there might be one time where,
Except one. I get it.
I said close to.
Oh, close to.
yeah. So, Crystal's she was turning 15, turning 16 and whatever. After
After I was 16, I was fine.
you were fine actually after 16.
Just 15 to 16,
Yeah, it was
in
like
there.
15 to 16. So whatever. But hey,
We made it through.
we made it through. We lived through it. We did it. Somehow. Probably because your dad was there and he would keep me at an arm's length away from you.
That's true.
That's probably why when, you would come home and a parent would have dropped you off because you were drunk. And,
That was the least of our worries. Like that.
then
I think it was more by my behavior.
Your behavior,
like
too.
behavior,
But
but
that
like
was
also my
part.
attitude is what I mean.
Attitude.
Yes.
But your father was always the one who was like, I will deal with her because he was calmer than me.
Yes.
It's going to be
yeah.
of no benefit you yelling and screaming, the two of you in each other's face. So you go and be by yourself and I will look after this. And I'll let you know when you can come back in.
And I think when I was heightened and we were fighting, that definitely was the best approach to take. But yeah.
So it was good
Some
that there was
social experimentation as a teenager was not the biggest deal, but still. but Matthew can't even appreciate that. That's a whole other episode too. Matthew's, I always say, loser, nerdy teenage years compared to mine. That's another episode
Yes.
to have.
I didn't have a very adventurous teenage life.
Yeah, there you go.
No.
And then too, your teenage years were people in and out of our house.
Yeah, my cousins.
So, it was different, right? Like, so was that the reason that you had all these issues?
Maybe.
Like,
maybe
maybe.
we can blame my cousins for the way that I was when I was 15.
And thank God you're friends with them today.
I am.
which
I
is
like
so
my
nice.
cousins a lot.
There you go.
I even love them. There you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hopefully they listen to this. I'm going to send it to them.
Yeah.
Like we talk about you guys, you better listen.
Yeah.
That's right.
And we'll leave it right till the end so they have to listen all the way through.
That's right. Well, thank you for chatting with us.
Oh, no problem. It was fun.
There you go.
Made me think about things too that
I think I
hadn't
even
kind of
learned some
forgotten.
Hadn't
things.
thought
So
of
there
it.
you go.
There
Wow.
you go.
Mm-hmm.
Did you
Yeah.
learn anything going forward to be as a mother?
No, I think I just learned more about you.
Oh, okay.
I already have motherhood figured out.
Luck to you. You got motherhood figured out.
No, I do think though, like, I think, and I don't know how to solve this, and I don't expect anybody necessarily in the moment to be able to solve this, but I think there is definitely a theme here of there is a lot of outside pressure on mothers today that doesn't sound like was there in at least the 80s in the same ways. And I think that's creating a lot of complication for at some point we'll talk about the mental load of motherhood and what that weighs on Crystal a lot.
Yeah.
And so, I think no solutions, but I think there's a problem that's really embedded there.
And maybe
I
some
agree.
just appreciation of the fact that maybe there is a lot of extra stress that maybe we don't need to hold. But hey, that's a conversation for another day.
Another
Exactly.
day.
Cool. Thanks, Ratty.
No problem.
All right.
Had fun.
Bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks for listening to the Team Crew podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until then, see you next week.